Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I've not seen this.
If it's all right, could we look at Amendment 114? And,
Yes, sir, that's the one that's just being passed out.
that's just
to
being
us.
passed out right now, with apologies to Senator D and Senator R. I included their names on it without asking their permission. Shame on me, it was moving quickly. So if they're unhappy with this, then the fault is all mine. If they're happy with this, the credit is all theirs. The only change that is made, this came out of a conversation that the only change between 75 and 114, which came out of a conversation with Mr. Lehman and Mr. Kane, is lines 6 and 7 on page 2. I think it was always the intent of the sponsors of the amendment that it be limited to $15 million from all sources. I think this is really, in my opinion, a technical amendment to make sure that the intent of 75 is captured. That's the change. So then the rest of the amendment is the same, except that Section 4 is broken into 3 paragraphs for clarity. So let's go through the entire amendment. Section 2 of the bill, Roman 6, line...
Just Senator Carson, if you want to come up and sit in the witness chair, we're going to be going to your bill next, and certainly being the policy committee person, I'm interested in your input into this. So
Thank you.
we'll try to get that all together and make sure that we get everything we need.
All right, so the first piece of the amendment is new language about a quarterly progress report. This was something Senator Rosenwald, I thought, had a great idea, so it just outlines who it goes to and what the quarterly report is being, who it's being sent to and what they're supposed to accommodate. Then the new language in Section 4, starting on line 24. The sum of $15 million is appropriated. It's non-lapsing, continually appropriated, and not be transferred or used for any other purpose. So it stays in a restricted account, so it can't be used for any other purpose. Flipping the page, it's the intent of the 3 sponsors of the amendment that we do everything that we can to use federal discretionary funds available in the ARPA law or any other federal funds first before we use general funds, and then second, third, I mean the language that puts the technical change to put a hard and fast cap on the overall cost at $15 million. Okay?
Are there questions to Senator Bradley? Senator Carson, if you'd go over your amendment, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson. I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn, and I have for your consideration this afternoon amendment number 2023-0076S. Mr. Chairman, this amendment came about because of some concerns concerning security of this new facility. We discussed some of those concerns last week on the Senate floor. And so in response, I worked with my fellow colleagues in order to come up with an amendment which we feel will address their concerns. And basically what this does is it's going to create a commission that is going to study the security that's going to be at this new facility. It's going to encompass members of the Senate as well as members of the House, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Commissioner of Safety, the child advocate, a representative from the Sheriff's Association, and includes both someone from the local law enforcement agency as well as the municipal governing body. Mr. Chair, currently right now, Hampstead Hospital, where we house, where children receive psychiatric treatment, is not a secure facility. And so we're going to build what will end up being a secure facility there. So all this does is it gives the parties an opportunity to come together to talk about security and make recommendations to the legislature so that we can roll those concerns into a final product. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Close enough. I wish I could tell you to call me Jim, but you know.
I know the feeling.
All right. It looks to me like if you did this, we need to do yours first and then Senator Bradley's?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions for Senator.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Good
How are you?
afternoon, Senator.
So Senator Birdsell has sent in a couple of questions.
Sure.
She wants to know if the commission is going to be put together after the governor chooses the municipality or before.
I can't answer that question because it's within the governor's purview as to when he is going to announce where this is going. I think all indications are pointing towards Hampstead, but this is his job, not ours, and so we just have to wait until he decides. But this, if you choose to pass this, it's going to go over to the House, and hopefully this will get put together and will be up and running concurrently.
Follow-up?
Absolutely.
All right, our follow-up is, if it's before, how will we know who to I gotta read that again. If it is before, how will we know who to name to the commission, I guess?
Well, thank you. I think that the Commissioner of the Department of Safety, the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Child Advocate, I think those, we kind of have a pretty good idea who those folks are going to be. We do have, again, just based on the fact that it looks like it is going into Hampstead, the 3 senators appointed will be the senators that are going to be in the affected area, as well as the representatives. And again, then the Sheriff's Association, it looks like it will probably be the sheriff from the Rockingham County. I've already had discussions with him. And local law enforcement agency, I mean, that is going to be done by the Speaker. And the municipal governing body is going to be appointed by the Senate President, and I'm sure Senator Birdsell will have conversations with the Senate President as to who she thinks is best going to represent that affected area.
And I believe that answers the third question she had, so I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to bring up,
Senator.
oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Well, I'd like to follow up on the question of the timing that Senator Pearl raised. The way I read this amendment, the commission becomes effective as soon as the bill is signed,
Correct.
which has to be before March 1st, right?
Mhm.
Or yeah. Is there any possibility that we're going to nail down a definite site before March 1st?
Senator, I wish we could, but again, it's not within our purview. That is within the governor's purview, and I believe I read something this weekend that he said it looks like it was going to be Hampstead, but that final decision belongs to the governor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to bring up from the governor's office, Mr. Gary.
So,
And after he speaks, then I'll start taking motions on the things we're gonna vote on. It doesn't matter, you can sit at the table, you can sit back there, either.
I've got to go back to judiciary.
Okay,
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senators. My name is James Gary. I'm the State Budget Director, and I am also the Governor's Office representative to Gopher.
Okay.
I am here to answer any questions you may have.
And certainly, you know, one of the things that people have asked me for is what is available out there for providing funding for the Sununu Center, or the replacement building, I should say.
The total amount of ARPA dollars we had was approximately $995 million. We have allocated about $900 million of that. But within that cushion there, we have reserved $15 million for the replacement to the Sununu Center. So,
Okay.
in that it was actually supposed to, the first part of that was supposed to go to fiscal in January, but HHS asked for a little more time because they wanted to make sure that they had the right figure. The first part was for the architect, roughly about 1.6 million. That's the number they really want to get down. So it may come in February, and then the remainder was for the construction of the facility. But the money is reserved and is there, and it'll be going to fiscal as soon as HHS is ready to bring it.
Excellent. Questions from committee members? That was simple.
Great.
When
We said it
give
would be
us the-
short. Thank you,
When you
Senator.
give us the answer we want, I guess it's
We have the money.
simple that way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anybody else that wants to speak before I start taking motions? Okay, we're going to get a motion on the bill, then we're gonna get a motion on 0076, then we're gonna get a motion on 0114, in that order, okay?
I move,
So-
move ought to pass on Senate Bill 1.
So we have an ought to pass. Do we have a second? Senator Rosenwald seconds. Okay, now, amendments. Do I have a motion on 0076? We have a motion to adopt amendment 0076.
Second.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of amendment 0076, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously. Do I have a motion on Senate Amendment 0114?
I move ought to pass.
We have an ought to pass, and we have a second by Senator Rosenwald. Okay, do I have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none opposed, it passes unanimously. And now we already have a motion about to pass on the bill. Is there any discussion? And we're voting on ought to pass, oh, Senator Bradley.
I just want to say to everybody involved, great job.
We're voting on ought to pass as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And it passes unanimously. Any other business to come before executive committee? Senator Brad, no.
Oh.
I will take it out.
Glad you didn't turn to your right.
I'll take it out. All right. Nothing else before the executive? Okay. So I have a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
And we have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're out of executive session. And now we have two presentations that are scheduled.
Hey, you run the trains on time.
Hey, we only do what we can. Only do what we can.
Yeah, well, I wasn't very long-winded.
Amen. Mr. Kane, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Kane. I'm the Legislative Budget Assistant for the state of New Hampshire. I've been asked to give a quick presentation or a quick budget orientation, just kind of an overview of the process, because we do have new membership, although you've all been involved in the legislature for several years. Before I start, I'd just like to kind of go over quickly our office. We're a nonpartisan office. We consist of a budget division, which is myself Chris Shea, who's the deputy LBA. We have Mike Hoffman, a senior budget officer. Mick Landergan's a senior budget officer. Kevin Ripple, who's sitting right next to me, is a budget officer. And then Melissa Rollins, who you may remember from Department of Revenue Administration, joined us a year ago. So she's also a budget officer. We also have 25, between 23 and 25 at any time auditors, split evenly between performance audit and financial audit. So you will see a lot of the budget division once the Senate gets going on their bills. That's why Kevin's here today. He's in charge of Category 5, or Health and Human Services. So as you exec bills out of the committee, we'll make sure we have a staff member here to help with amendments and answer any questions that you need. It's kind of where we are now. I handed you a document that I presented a little higher in more detail at House Finance about a week ago. I probably bored them. I'll try not to do the same with you. But in general, I'm going to kind of jump to a couple of slides. One being, I think one of the more important ones for you, at least today, is the budget timeline. And so if you go to page 24, you'll see kind of the operating budget process. By the time the Senate gets their budget, the operating budget for the 24-25 biennium will have been being worked on by the agency and the governor and the legislature for almost a year. That process started back in March, where agencies start to input their position information and all their programmatic detail for expenditures into the budget system. That's released in October. And then the governor has budget hearings, which he had back in November, to have the agencies come in and give a very high-level summary of what they've submitted in their agency budget requests that is really driven by statute on what's included. What you'll see is efficiency budgets that are basically carrying out what's required of statute at that time. And they also have prioritized needs. Those are needs that are being discussed right now with the governor, where the agencies, they would like, for lack of a better term, both a wish list, but also areas where they think they could increase funding to meet the need that's out there in the various programs. The governor's phase is currently ongoing. Our office is not involved in that phase. The agencies are involved in day-to-day meetings with the governor on what he would like to present to the legislature when he releases his budget by February 15th, is according to statute. But as you know in the calendar, on February 14th, on Valentine's Day this year, the governor will give his budget address to the full legislature. That will then kick off the budget process for the House. So the House receives the budget first. They receive House Bill 1, which are the spending portions of the budget, and they also receive House Bill 2, which are the policy portions of the budget. Any changes to statute, any changes, any new programs, any changes to taxes or fees will be in House Bill 2. The New Hampshire Constitution requires that any change in statute, suspension of statute, does not occur in the budget bill itself, so it can't occur in House Bill 1. So how the legislature maneuvers through that process is to have a trailer bill, they call it, which is House Bill 2, which contains all the policy and all the other changes. So in March, we'll have a lot of hearings with the House. Typically what happens is the week after, or maybe that Friday, Chairman Weiler, the chair of House Finance, will have the budget director, James Geary, as well as the governor come in to give a presentation to House Finance and then break down into divisions. House Finance is broken down into 3 divisions. You have Division 1, which is Category 1 of government, which is general government, also administrative Category 2, which is administration of justice and public protection, and Category 3 is resource and protection. Division 2 is your transportation, education, and safety budgets, and Division 3 is your Category 5, which is health and human services. The House has about 6 weeks. So right now we know, based on the current deadlines, if you turn to page 23, that the deadline for the, 22, the deadline for the House to act on all bills is April 6th. That includes the budget document. So by April 6th, the House will take their final vote. If we back up from there, that means that the House Finance Committee has to report out their version of the budget by March 30th. And if we back that off another week. That means that the divisions themselves will have to finalize their recommendations by about March 23rd. And that because what happens is the divisions put together packets that the full finance committee by division, full finance committee will vote on. They'll present them on the Monday and Tuesday prior to that final vote on the 30th. And then go out. So about a little over a month is what the House has. So it goes really fast. And at the same time, you have a House Ways and Means Committee that's developing your revenue estimates. Revenue estimates for not only fiscal year 23, which we're currently in, but for the next two biennium, for the next 2 fiscal years, for the 24-25 biennium. So those estimates, I know they're going to begin, House Ways and Means will begin to have agencies coming in to explain kind of where they think revenues will end up for 23, their outlook for the next 2 years on where they think their revenues will continue. And then the House Ways and Means Committee provides those estimates to the House Finance Committee so that in the end we have a balanced budget. It is required by statute, and I think I flipped by that, but I'll go back. There's always a discussion of whether or not there's a constitutional requirement for a balanced budget, which there is not. However, there is a statutory requirement on page 11 is RSA 98B, the adoption of an operating budget. And that's where it clearly sets out that the revenues and expenditures, including lapses being unexpended appropriations, need to balance. And so that's what our office will do. We'll look at the governor's balance sheet when he presents his budget on February 14th, and then we'll monitor the revenues from the House Ways and Means Committee. We'll monitor legislative activity on various pieces of legislation, as well as fiscal committee activity, any additional general funds, or any other general fund appropriations to ensure that the House and the Senate and Committee of Conference adopt a balanced budget at the end of their process. So the House has kind of the House Ways and Means Committee, very tough window, or very tight window to estimate revenues, and with very limited information for this fiscal year. They'll have about 7 months, maybe 8 months of activity for the fiscal year, but they don't have March and April, which are 2 large revenue months for the state of New Hampshire. We collect majority of our, not a majority, but a high percentage of our taxes during March and April. The benefit for the Senate, though, is that you will have month-end March collections. You'll have your month-end April collections. So when your Senate Ways and Means Committee gets together and provides an estimate, you'll have 2 big months of fiscal year activity on revenues to project revenues for 23, and then also gives you a sense based on your meetings and discussions with the agencies where 24 and 25 is. The Senate has, looking at the deadlines, the Senate has basically most of the month of April, most of the month of May to talk about revenues, to find out what the governor proposed in his budget, what the House changed from the governor's proposal, and to discuss amongst yourselves and agencies and your constituents where you want the Senate proposal to be. So you'll have usually the month of March is used in this committee for information gathering. The month of April, information gathering. What did the House propose? What did the governor propose? What do the agencies still want? What do your constituents want? And then in May, it starts to pick up a little. You have 2 big months of revenue. You know where the revenues will most likely end for 23. And then you'll start to really craft that budget, how the Senate wants to propose it. Senate will vote their budget out at the beginning of June, most likely, based on historic trends and looking at your the current dates in your calendar for deadlines. And then present that to the House on what the Senate changed to the House budget, and then have typically a committee of conference, unless the House agrees to concur. Usually what happens is it's concur and request, non-concur, request a committee of conference, and it'll be about a week where the House and Senate get to work out their differences on the two proposals. Seems like a tight time, but you're all very well, you're involved, you're watching what the House, and I know you'll watch what the House does over the next couple months before the Senate gets the budget. You'll hear from your constituents and what the House is doing. So by the time you get to committee conference, you have a wealth of information on the budget phase to come up with an agreement. And then after the committee conference budget is adopted, it goes to the governor, who can sign it, let it become law without signature, or veto it. The governor's options are to veto the entire package of House Bill 1. He does not have line item veto, so it's all or nothing as far as his approval. And if that is adopted, it becomes law. And so that's kind of a high level overview of the budget process. Senate operates differently. You see, you have a smaller committee. You'll have individual agencies come in maybe to talk about topics over the next few months, big programs, big questions that you have relative to their budget proposals for the next 2 years. We'll also post everything that is being discussed in the House and handed out in the divisions. We'll make sure that on our website, and I'll send a link to all of the members, we keep a running list of and tally of all the changes that the House made, all the documents that are handed out, a link to all the recordings that the House has. Knowing you're very busy with your own business, with all the bills coming through, we'll make sure that we keep that, and we'll continue that through the entire committee conference process so that both the legislators, members of the public, and the agencies can all keep track of what's going on. If I just kind of jump on, I won't go over kind of a format. Again, feel free, I know I don't have a lot of time, so feel free to stop by to my office in State House 101 or stop by 102 and ask any of our analysts any questions about the budget process, where we are, and we can fill you in to the best of our ability. Obviously, the House is going to be having their own discussions on the budget. We'll share whatever's discussed in public that we're involved in on kind of what they're thinking. We'll also help you as you start to come up with your own ideas. So please feel free to stop by. That's why we're there. On page 45 is a document that you'll see throughout the entire process. And I just want to make sure I don't run into Taylor's time, but this is a surplus statement. And what this is on page 45 is a smaller version of what you'll see. You'll get it on legal paper so you can actually view it. But you can see that there are 4 columns for the last budget. You'll have the governor's proposal, House, Senate, and committee of conference. Committee of conference document being the final surplus statement that we will produce before it's signed into law. And that allows you to go through the process and to see what were the revenues, the estimated revenues by all the bodies, what were the revenue adjustments, being those House Bill 2 changes or bills that passed on their own, what are the appropriations, and what are your lapses, et cetera, and what were the cumulative balances going through or ending for each fiscal year. So we'll do that for both for the General and Education Trust Fund in total and individually, but we'll also provide that for the Highway Fund and the Fish and Game Fund. And just page 48, the reason Kevin's sitting here isn't because HHS is one of the largest shares of the budget. He just happened to have Senate Bill 1. But on page 48, you can see that HHS makes up 43.4% of the entire budget in 22 and 23. Education second with about 22.4%. And if you flip to the next page, you can see one of the main reasons for that is your federal funds. HHS on page 49, in total, federal funds in the entire budget is about $4.2 million. HHS, as you know, has a lot of federal match program, 100% solely funded federal programs. So that's why they're one of the larger areas of the budget. And then we just have kind of a breakdown of the general and other funds, education trust funds, and kind of how they compare to the total. I was just going to jump sorry.
Expand a little bit on what is contained in other funds.
Yep. So your other funds are your it's both your agency income. So if an agency collects fees or has an assessment like insurance or banking, if there are restricted revenues like MET being one of the largest restricted revenues, if you have an agency that's funded from transfers from other agencies, DOIT, for instance, is all agency income. And so there's so-called other funds. The budget document itself will break that down by each agency on kind of where that comes, but those are the majority of the other funds.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm not going to go separate from the budget process, which some of you are on fiscal committee. Fiscal also has the ability outside of the budget to authorize additional acceptance expenditure of federal funds in some instances, like Judicial Council and Justice, to appropriate additional general funds. but a majority of that is federal funds that comes through fiscal. And in a normal year, I've been with the office for 24 years. In a normal year, it's usually $200 to $300 that fiscal committee will accept and expend outside of the budget for these some are ongoing programs, but they're not programs that will continue. So they'll come in to request to accept and expend. But if you look at the sheets from page 59 all the way through, you can see in the last 2 years, 22 and 23, you're up above $1.6 billion of additional federal funds. Large share of that is obviously ARPA funds, about $1 billion of ARPA funds, and then also additional federal funds that were passed in separate legislation. So it's definitely higher than usual. And I think if you were to look at a fiscal committee agenda for the last couple of years, the number of items will show that just those funds. Those funds won't be here forever. ARPA funds will be here through the end of 26, but they're separate from their budgeted funds. And my guess is, and James Geary's here when the governor's developing his budget, ARPA funds will continue to be kept separate from the budget since they're not an ongoing operating program. Kind of where we are now, I gave a presentation early in January of kind of where the state is relative to general and education trust fund surplus or estimated surpluses. On page 88 is a surplus statement from the annual comprehensive financial report. So that what this does is provide what is the balance at the close of 22, which ended on June 30th of 22. The general fund balance at the end of fiscal year 22 was $253.3 million, and the education trust fund was $108 million for a total combined undesignated fund balance of $361.3 million. In addition, designated another $100 million from the rainy day fund for the YDC settlement fund, the $100 million. And then also the rainy day fund has $159.9 million balance available because the legislature passed in 22 the dedication of $100 million for the YDC settlement. So you can see 21 ended with a rainy day fund balance of about 257.8, but with that special legislation that was passed in 22, 100 million was carved out for the YDC settlement. So as far as the General Education Trust Fund, when the budget was developed, or when the committee conference ended in June of 21, they thought that the beginning or the ending balance for 22 would be about $60+ million. It's almost $300 million over that. A large reason for that being the revenue. Revenue has overperformed planned in 22 by about $400 million, and year to date through December in 23, already another $200 million up. The legislature in 22 did appropriate almost $300 million of, we call them legislative specials, so individual one-time appropriations for various projects to use some of that estimated surplus. But as you'll see going through, there'll be multiple bills that will recommend spending some of that surplus as we go through. We're paying attention to January revenues, and the governor's estimates will come out in February. And then what I'll do is I usually put together a snapshot for both finance committees so you can keep track of where revenues are trending, what bills have passed the legislature that will have a cost, just that you know on a month-to-month basis, even more frequent, of kind of how the state's performing. Right now, on a general and education trust fund cash basis, it's in a very good position. And then if you look at, there's a couple other documents on page 89 through 92 with a 10-year, all the way through page 94, a 10-year history of kind of positions, revenues, and where the funds have been. So that's where I'll stop right now. There's a lot to go over. I would just, again, I will send the link to the House Finance Committee. All the division hearings will be recorded and saved on our website on YouTube, so you can watch it in your free time. And then if you do not have the time to look and go through 3 hours of meetings on YouTube, again, feel free to stop by our office and just ask us for kind of a quick update of what the House has been discussing. And then we can provide any documents or try to answer any questions you have. So that's all I have, but I'll leave that open for questions. Or the annual comprehensive financial report, as Senator Gray's holding up, that's going to be presented at fiscal committee on Friday. Fiscal committee will meet at 1 o'clock on Friday, the 27th, and they'll provide an overview of the annual comprehensive financial report. It is an unqualified opinion, which is what the state wants. And we will have our auditors from KPMG go over a quick summary of what they found during that audit. So, any questions? I can either answer them now or offline. Or
I don't see anybody raising their hand, so.
okay. Well, thank you very much. We're
Thank
looking
you,
forward to
and-
working
and
with you.
I can attest that every time I knock on the door and he's there,
Yeah.
you know, he's let me in and tried to answer my question. You know, sometimes he needs to give me a little bit of instruction so that I can define my question better, but, well, we've been working at it so that,
Thank you
he
very much.
knows how much education I really do need.
That's what we're here for, and it changes for us every year. Just so you know. So we try to learn along with you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And without further ado, I see that the commissioner has come in, so we'll get him up here and turn the microphone over to him.
Good afternoon.
Just hit the red button when you're ready.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Very good. All right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about InvestNH today. This is what I came to sort of fill you in on where things stand with that program, a little bit of the history of that program, and kind of where we are. So first, let me introduce Andrew Dorsett, who is here with me today. Andrew is the program manager for the Invest program, and has been in the midst of running these various programs since he came on in July of last year. So just as a quick overview and history of the program, this was established last spring officially with finance approval and with governor and council approval. We had the staff signed on and operational by July. We focused our initial efforts on the program, the capital grant program, which I'll get to in a moment, but really sort of in terms of the background of what have been trying to achieve with InvestNH. In the end, it's a $100 million program of state fiscal recovery fund dollars under ARPA that were allocated to BEA, the goal of which was really twofold. One, it was to acknowledge, obviously, that we've had a very significant housing crisis in the state, and that it is, in fact, probably the number one challenge that we have from an economic standpoint at this point in time. And so we were looking at a number of areas into which we could make some investment. And one of those, in the area that sort of came out in terms of what we would be able to do the most quickly and the most efficiently, was with regard to the vacancy rates. We're seeing vacancy rates around the state at 0 to 0.5% in a lot of communities and counties. And this is pretty consistent no matter where you are, if you're in Manchester or if you're in North Conway. It's a very similar type of challenge in that regard. Also, very low inventory as it relates to, at this time, and continues to be, in multifamily housing and in rent availability of rental housing. So this was where the initial, at least, investment directly in affordable housing came to be, which was in projects that have a degree of shovel readiness already embedded. So these are projects that are not just sort of going through their architectural review and looking for, a site to build on. These are projects that are quite far along and that are facing a number of cost increases, whether they're inflationary costs for supplies or whether they're workforce or whatever the issue might be. And that these resources were brought to bear on those projects in order to accelerate those projects and those units coming online more quickly. The other part of InvestNH is really at the municipality side of the equation, because as I've said in the past, we could have $1 trillion, but if we don't have communities that are willing to cite and approve housing projects and housing units in their community, then that money is not going to be much of use. So the second half of the program is really aimed at the municipal partners that we have. These are really manifested in three specific programs. The first and the biggest is a per unit payment, basically a grant for communities that are able to permit affordable housing projects in their communities within a certain time frame. They would be eligible to apply for and receive up to $10,000 per unit of grant funds under ARPA. Those funds highly flexible. They could be used for virtually, I don't want to say any purpose, but a very flexible list of purposes you could use those funds for. And we're actually seeing some interesting uses of those funds as we roll along here, which I can talk about as well. The two other programs under the municipal side, one was for demolition. We have a lot of communities that, if not for that old building that was standing in the way, they'd be able to attract a developer to build some housing. These funds were put together to be able to help facilitate some of those demolition projects around the state. And then the final piece under the municipal program was for planning and zoning grants. And so this is for communities that are interested in finding ways and understanding how they can expand the housing availability and the housing inventory in their communities, how exactly they could go about that using either updated zoning rules or looking at what the zoning costs might be. This was an opportunity to provide grants for that purpose. And I would say that that component of the program is being administered by our colleagues at New Hampshire Housing. So that's the kind of the overview. I would say going back to the capital grant program, because that's the one that has received a lot of the attention recently. These ended up being about 30 grants that were provided to nonprofit and for-profit developers around the state for projects of various sizes, all the way from a handful of units right up to a couple hundred units. We had a maximum grant size of $3 million for that program. They have all been awarded and are in various stages of getting the bureaucratic component out of the way and advancing those projects as we have anticipated. So they have an 18-month time frame to be able to be eligible to spend those resources. That's due in large part to the ARPA time restrictions that are in place. But also because we want to see these projects move as quickly as we can. So again, that total was $50 million. There was a separate grant made in the amount of $10 million to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority for them to put towards their projects that are eligible under the low-income housing tax credit project. So that's a separate federal program that New Hampshire Housing facilitates. And the $10 million that was awarded to NIFA for that purpose has been used to help, again, advance those projects quickly and get those units on market as quickly as we can. So that's kind of the real high-level overview. I mean, if there are some specific areas that you want to jump into, I mean, Andrew and I are here to talk about whatever you'd like.
Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So, several questions. The capital grants, of the $50 million that have been awarded, how many units do you think that is going to get onto the market and in that 18-month time frame? Yes, sir. So the number is just short of 1,000 units for in the affordable category. So in this program, we define affordable at 80% of area median income or below. So it has to be affordable to that population. I think we're at almost 2,500 total units because there were a couple of projects that are mixed income. So they might have some market rate units that are in the project as well. So another 1,500 mixed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What, curious, of so 2,500 new units, what percentage of the overall housing stock in terms of,
I don't know off the top of my head. We can get that number.
1%, 2%?
It's going to be in that category, I think.
Okay,
That would be my guess.
right. So what is your estimate as to, you know, the whole getting back to rental at vacancy rates of less than 0.5% in this 18-month time frame? How is it going to move the needle?
I think if you look at the combination of all of our projects that we're going to be funding, the projects that are in a constant churn at New Hampshire Housing with their low-income housing tax credit, I'm hoping that we can get us up over 1% with this initial round. A healthy vacancy rate is typically a 3 to 5% range. So that's kind of where we're trying to move toward. There's a whole ton of other aspects to all this. Housing, as you know, is extremely complex, and who this is benefiting and so on. But in terms of that target for this program, that's where I would expect we are right now.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Can I continue? Or Senator Rosenwald, go ahead.
Senator, we give him a chance to think. Go ahead, Senator Rosenwald.
So the capital grant program, the projects that would be shovel ready, did that include being fully permitted at the time?
They have to be fully permitted in order to get the funding, yes.
So, okay, so before they applied, they had to be?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the program required that they have permits except for those that are state permits. Those were able to be waived. In some cases, there were projects where the permits were at a pretty late stage municipally as well. So.
Okay, could I?
You may
Thank
continue.
you. So the requirement is they maintain this affordability for 5 years. Do you have a sense of how many of the 1,000 units will be able to stay affordable beyond the 5 years, and what
you know that?
tools
Yes.
there might be available to help?
Yeah, and I'll let
them
Andrew
do
answer
that?
that. I think to what you're getting at, Senator, is that a number of the programs that are projects, I should say, that are being funded with the Invest in Age program already have other program funding in them. So it might be the low-income housing tax credit program or others that already have like a very substantial affordability restriction on the life of that project. So a number of those are within our realm as well. But Andrew, do you have any other?
Yeah, the average is 31 years
For all of them, it's
for all.
For all
for all
1,000.
units, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bradley, you know,
So, moving to the municipal grant, what's been the uptake rate by municipalities for the grants?
It's been a little slow, I will say, at this point. We are, Andrew and his team are engaged right now in a number of additional outreach strategies with communities around the state. I think it's also, reflective of there's a little bit of a time frame that needs to occur so that
Zoning changes,
Yeah, right.
budget.
well,
every-
also, a project that comes in, they have to do it within a certain time frame. So I think it's 6 months is what we're looking for under that program. So we're still within that window of when the program first authorized. So I think we're probably around 15 communities so far that we've interacted with or that we're funding. Is that right?
Can you tell us what the communities are?
I don't have that list in front of me. I can send those to you. I think the other thing to remember here, and I don't want to get myself in trouble because we have to go through executive council with some of these. So sometimes we have to wait for that because if it's a competitive process, we have to wait for they to go on to their their agenda, but let me see what I can do.
That's why I asked if you could.
Yeah, that's all.
And if I could, any
Certainly, Senator.
takers on the zoning grant
Yes.
initiative?
Yes, we're due to see an updated report at the end of this month, so next week. But as of the last report, I think we had 16 communities that were being funded under that program. And that list is on the New Hampshire Housing website. I don't think I printed it out here today, but I can get that to you.
Okay.
Additional questions from the committee members?
Well, since I've
Yes,
asked on every of the
Senator
others,
Bradley?
I might as well, is any uptake on the demolition?
Yeah. Yes, we have 26 applications under the demolition program. So that one definitely is a popular one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you, and we know your phone number, so we can call you back. if we
Yes,
need
you
to.
do. I know you do. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Just informational purposes for the committee. I've added a couple spaces for LBA to be able to sit at the table. Oftentimes they bring computers in here and try to keep up with us. So I believe that that will assist them in doing that. It also frees up a few more chairs out there in the audience. And so there's a dual purpose. We're trying to do that. It would help if we all mute our phones before we come in. Any other comments before I hit the thing and said we're adjourned?
Next week, we're hearing,
We're looking at the calendar right now. There's several bills on there that look like they're going to get a lot of attendance. So we're going to try to do that. But we also want to bring over the judicial branch. We haven't really gotten to Health and Human Services yet, but we're trying to do that along the way also. Senator Luke.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when are we going to talk about DISH and the Met tax?
Next week.
Next week?
Yeah, that's.
I thought I saw it on the schedule for this week. I apologize.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It originally was on this week's calendar, but they had a conflict with the person they were going to have present, and certainly they wanted to present it from the opinion of their most knowledgeable person.
Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
that's why we rescheduled to next week. Okay? Other things that are going on in finance, you know, if I'm doing something you don't like or don't want, you know, you're gonna have to tell me. You know, I'm trying to get there. For things that go on to the FN report, I'm told that Senator D'Alessandro, you know, used to look at $10,000 as a cut point. I'm not gonna use that as a firm cut point. You know, it may slide up and down depending upon the issue, but we're going to look at that and try to learn from our esteemed colleagues and doing the right thing on the FN report. So, all right. With that, I believe our business for the day is completed. We are adjourned.
What do you know about the Human Rights Commission?
Oh, there is one.
Well, they want $1.7 million for fiscal year '25.